Have you ever felt the whisper of ancient gods guiding your path? Welcome to the Ancient Tree of Life show, your gateway to the mystical world of ancient Egyptian deities and beyond. Whether you're eager to unlock timeless wisdom or navigate modern challenges with age-old insights, we're here to help you every step of the way. Each episode offers clear, relatable stories and practical lessons inspired by the gods themselves. Are you ready to explore the roots of ancient wisdom with us?
So, hello. Welcome back. This is Ray Ia with the Ancient Tree of Life spirituality show. We discuss things related to the ancient Egyptians, or what is more modernly being referred to as Kemetic Egypt, or ancient Kemet, which is the original name for the Egyptians and their land. But at times you'll also hear us call it Egypt, just because it's ingrained in our brains to call it Egypt, even though that's a term that the Greeks coined the Egyptians. But we like to use the original names and the original terms for the Egyptians simply because there's power in it. There's power in words. There's power in tradition. There's power in culture. And when you use terms and words, they invoke feelings. And when those feelings have been used and called upon for ages, for centuries, they have an effect. They have a spark or a connection, because it's an energy. And this is a very deep topic that I'll try to keep light. A lot of what is known about the Egyptians and a lot of these very old Eastern spiritual systems and religions is mysterious to a lot of people, especially to the West. The Western world has got a totally different view and ideology about spirituality, religion, and everything, simply because the West is more so the new kid on the block, and a lot of what they know they derived from the Easterners, from the Eastern world. And what they derived from the Eastern world, they really didn't understand other than the surface. And so the West, perfect example, astrology. Astrology in the West is totally different than astrology in the East. I've noticed one of the reasons I wanted to do a new live stream. Well, it's the beginning of the year, and I wanted to make a face. I wanted to put out a new video for the new year. I need to get prepared for the new year, and we want to talk about what that actually means, what the new year actually means, right? I was just on Ra'u Neframin's channel, and he was talking about the new year and what it means, and how everybody spends so much money on New Year celebrations, but he's just like, what does that really mean, people? He's like, we spend millions, if not billions of dollars on the new year, but he's like, the world is not new. It's actually getting older. Every moment that goes by, the world gets older. We get older. He's like, so what are we celebrating with this newness? And I'm like, that's true. And then he goes in to talk about how it's about the regeneration and the rejuvenation of self. And so I kind of wanted to jump on board and kind of chime in about that. Just want to say, hey, Nettie, thanks for joining. Welcome to Ancient Tree of Life. My name's Ray Ia. If you want to go ahead and shout out and say hello, that'd be great. But in the West, astrology is just totally just like it's different. So is the tarot. The tarot being used in the West, totally different than what it actually is. The tarot is not a fortune-telling system. It's a divination tool, yes, but it's not a fortune-telling system. It does not predict the future. If anything, the person doing the reading is the vessel, and they receive information through working with you and being a practitioner, and they receive information and they relay it. But the cards themselves are not fortune-telling tools at all. But in the West, you've got these psychics, and you've got these tarot card readers, and they want to tell read your cards and tell your future and all this stuff. And that's why you have a lot of people that just sort of balk at tarot cards and astrology and all this stuff, because in the West, it's almost like it's an entertainment thing, and so it doesn't get a lot of credibility. In the East, it was and is a very different thing. Astrology is a science. It is an art, but it also it is a science. And that's kind of what led me into wanting to do one of these webinars, seminars, whatever you want to call it, at the start of the year. I noticed that when I put information out on astrology on the various social media platforms, some people do like it, but I noticed on Instagram, more so than anything, I noticed my numbers drop. People unsubscribe when I discuss things about astrology. And for the past, probably, I want to say maybe, 6 months or so, I've been noticing this. And I thought it was interesting. I was like, why would people unsubscribe when you're talking about something that is, or when you're sharing something that's so important as astrology? And then I realized, for one, it's the people who they're not really coming to these channels looking for that type of information. If you guys have been on any of these ancient civilization channels, whether it be Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, the information that they're regurgitating is pretty much the same thing. They're showing pictures of ancient Egypt, and they're sharing images of pharaohs and of gods, and the same information, the same photos, maybe a little bit different now that AI is out. The same information is being regurgitated over and over, and they're just talking about the surface. They're not really digging into the depths of what this stuff represents, and I find it humorous, and I also find it sad. I find it humorous because you've got these people who set up these channels, and they're just regurgitating this information because they find it's a way to get people to follow them and to like them. And I can understand that, but that's a very surface thing that I don't really support. I feel you should be trying to share like pertinent information, real information, good information, deep information. But I realize everybody's different. Not everybody's the same. Not everybody's like me. I'm not like everybody else. And so, as I was saying before, whenever I shared astrology information on Instagram, I noticed that my numbers would go down. And today, I got up and I just started thinking about, not even really thinking. Sometimes you think and you're consciously thinking or planning about ideas. And sometimes information just sort of flows to you. And that's kind of what happened today. I had a bunch of information, collective information, that I've probably thought about over the course of the past few months that just sort of flooded to me. And I felt the need to share it. But I had a great fear that I would forget this stuff by the time I got to write it down or got to share it, or that by the time I did share it, I would forget half of the stuff that had flowed to me. So what I did was, after going out and running some errands, I came back and I jotted down notes on a lot of the stuff that was coming to me. That way I could share it. So some of the topics, I've got some points of interest here in a text file. Some of the things I want to go over were like the new solar year and what it means, astrology, symbology, the chakra system, which is a complicated discussion. It's the chakra. The chakra system chakra is an Indian, not Native American, but Indian term. In Africa, or at least in Kemet, it's called the Shin Center, or the Shin. So Shin is as a Kemetic term, and chakra as an India term, and it's a very heavy discussion. So I'm only going to lightly get into it here. But the chakra system, the Urius symbol, which is Wadjet in ancient Kemet, or Uchat, which is also the symbol of on Ra's crown, the serpent, or the cobra, or the snake. Which, since now we're in the year of the snake, I kind of felt it was a good idea to sort of talk about that as well, because I've been hinting on that. If you've been following me for any period of time, especially probably the last like 2-3 months, you've seen me touch bases on the Urius, Wadjet, and what Ra or Re actually represents. And then also, once again, talking about astrology, talking about how astrology integrates in with the solar year, but not astrology from a Western perspective, but more so from a hybrid Eastern Western perspective. And then also the lunar cycles, which are also linked to astrology and the astrological symbols, and then touching on some of the ancient Sumerian principles, lore, learning system, which is we'll lightly touch on, but not talk a lot about here today. The ancient Sumerian pantheon of gods and goddesses, the ladder of lights, and how that kind of ties into the chakra system. So it's kind of what I wanted to talk about here, just lightly today, just to sort of give an introduction to what it is that the ancient tree of life has been about, what it's evolved from, and where we're at right now. So one of the points I want to go touch bases on, the solar new year and what it means. It's 2025. We're in February. It's February 2nd, 2025. And what does that mean? We talked a little bit about it earlier with, yes, it is a new year, but the world is not new. It's actually, it's older. It's significantly older. We're older. As the years progress on, we get older. But what does it all mean? What is this New Year thing about? And not just New Year's on a physical level, but what does it mean on a spiritual level? What does it mean on a renewal level? What does it mean on a interpersonal level? And these are some of the posts that I've been dropping here in the last like few months or so, if you've been following. And as I posted in one of the other channels, when I was following Ra'u Nepharamen, I mentioned how we start sharing this information. We start getting prepared for it in fall, right? And I'm going to go into some astrology a little bit. We start going talking about this this rise and fall, or this the death of the sun in fall, which is around October, the end of, well, it's in Scorpio, right? So it's the end of October, roughly, probably like the third week of September, going from October into the 1st of November, right? And that is when the sun actually is not as, we're not as close to the sun as we usually are. And that's where you get in, our seasons start to change, obviously, right? The sunlight starts to diminish. It gets a little bit colder, a little bit cooler. And this is representative of our physical planet being further away from the sun itself. And that's on a physical level. Now, let's go to a mythological level. On a mythological level, you've got these various religions and these various spiritual systems where they talk about how the sun dies and how the sun is dead. And then we have that word sun, S-U-N, which is also intertwined with the word sun, S-O-N. And this is where we get these myths, stories, and lore about a sun dying. In ancient Kemet, we have Heru, which is the son of Aset, or the son of Isis. Isis to the Greeks and to the most of the modern world. Heru is the ancient Kemetic name. Horus is the actual Greek name that most of the world knows. Heru, or the sun, dies, right? Or is dying. And that is symbolic of the actual physical nature of our world, using a philosophical, spiritual representation of what is actually happening, right? And what this actually means is the sun's energy, and also our own personal solar energy, is diminishing. It is becoming diminished. And if we look further, and if we've been working with these systems for any long period of time, we know that the sun's solar energy is also tied to our own personal solar energy, or the Ra, which is within us. In India, it's referred to as the Kundalini, but in ancient Kemet, it's the Ra, or the Ra'u, which is the solar energy, which is within our bodies, right? And we know this because if we look at the ancient Egyptian god or Neter, Ra, we know that his crown, or above his head, there is a serpent, the royal serpent, or the snake, which is wrapped around the sun, right? And so that's the first representation that we have of Ra, or Re, what he actually represents, and what he is indicative of, right? And the sun's energy, the sun's power, and how it's tied into the serpent energy, or the Kundalini, or the snake energy, right? And with this being the year of the snake, and to the Chinese, it's an important factor, knowing that this next year, I believe it's 1 year, the Chinese lunar year, I believe it's 1 year. It means that for the next 12 months or so, this energy will be more prevalent than not. And so we have an opportunity to work with this energy, to build it up within us, and to experience it and to express it, to learn from it, which is probably the most important underlying aspect or facet of all of these ancient spiritual systems and ancient religious systems, is the learning. And I can't express that enough. I think a lot of people that are resharing and discussing ancient, whether it be ancient Egyptian, whether it be ancient Sumerian, ancient Meso-Sumerian, or Anunnaki, they're missing the point on what these cultures actually were trying to do and what they were trying to share and what they learned. And I say sharing, but I've come to the conclusion that a lot of this information was not shared with the public, was not shared with the masses, especially back in ancient days. It was very private. It was only held for a reserved group of people. Only the hierarchy in these spiritual systems had access to this information. Only the most educated people could read. And reading and writing have always been tools that have been the most important to humans, because you can relay and share information. So this information that we discuss so openly and so readily now was never for the public. And I've lightly said this before in some of my previous videos and previous posts, but I'm going to say it again. This information was sacred. It was secret. It was not meant for the masses, simply because, one, it gave power to the rulers of these nations, these kings, queens, these priests and priestesses, the people who governed or ruled, or the leaders, the spiritual leaders of these old ancient civilizations that we've heard of. It gave them power, right? And to those who could not read, to those who did not know the true secrets or words or prayers or chants or mantras, they had a very different interaction with the spiritual religious systems. What we talk about here at Ancient Tree of Life is probably a little bit of both, but my path work and my learning and my experience, what has been shown to me, has been more so what the leaders, the kings, the priests and the priestesses, the pharaohs, if you will, what they would have known, what they would have learned, what they would have practiced, and not necessarily what the common workers or the laborer would have known or would have used. So, say for instance, Ra or Re to the pharaoh would have been totally different than Ra or Re to the laborer or the farmer or the goat herder. It would have been a totally different understanding. The pharaoh or the king would have been using it as a way to say, I am the son of this sun. I am the son of this divine light. Especially in ancient Kemet, where Aset is the wife and consort and sister of Asar, and her symbol is the throne, right? Her symbol, literally, her hieroglyph is the throne. So, by divine right, the pharaoh was given rulership by Aset to sit upon the throne. And so he was essentially to be by blood given the right to rule. Just as Heru, which is Aset's son, is and also the son of Asar, which was to be Asar was one of the older kings, one of the older pharaohs, the original king or pharaoh. His son was to be the son or king of Kemet. And so all of these pharaohs tied their divine right to rule through Aset. and Asar and Heru. And once again, Aset's symbol is the throne. It's the physical shape of a throne. Her hieroglyph, her crown, is actually the sign of the throne. So a lot of these older ancient systems, they would have tied divine right to rule into what would have been the sun, because it would have been a very powerful symbol and also force on earth. On a physical level, because the sun produces light. You can see things when the sun's out, whereas when the sun is not out, visibility is not as prominent, right? You can't see as much. So to see is a very profound thing. So a lot of these ancient cultures would have had their right to rule by being directly tied to the sun. And a lot of these ancient cultures, in today's world, we may take it for granted, but in today's world, agriculture is handled by organizations, right? They do the farming, they do the growing of the wheat and the cutting of the wheat, and handling cattle and dairy products and things of that nature. But in ancient times, this would have been done by laborers, by farmers. There would have been a massive group of people, amount of work put into the labor of the land, the tilling of the land, the planting and the erecting of food to feed nations, hundreds, thousands of people, by working with the earth. And that all would have came from the sun's ability to send light and radiation to make things grow. So the sun had a profound impact or influence on civilizations and societies. And so the kings of these ancient civilizations would have tied themselves directly to it. It's a little bit different over in ancient Sumer. It's significantly different in ancient Sumer, because in Sumer the moon was set to be the father or give birth to the sun. So the moon was a bit more prevalent or prominent than the sun, but the sun also still did have its power or its significance, but it's a little bit different over in ancient Sumer, and we'll talk about that later. The ancient Sumerians, their systems are a little bit different. Ancient Kemetic systems are a bit different. Ancient Kemetic systems are so, unless you've been doing it for any period of time, they're very difficult to understand and learn. A lot of it is acquired through meditation and experience and years of dedication of working with these systems, and not really trying to learn, but just allowing the learning and the information to readily manifest itself to you. I believe this is why the idea of the boat or the ark and the sailing down a river like the Nile River was such an important icon, because it represented life, in that you're on a boat or a vessel or in life, and you're sailing down the great river of life, and you're not rushing anything. You're more so, you're experiencing life as it manifests and teaches you, and that is sort of the divine way to look at life and how to learn from life. So that kind of ties into the whole solar year. Why is the sun so important? Why is the solar year so important? Because a solar year was a complete cycle from life to death and then to rebirth, right? On a physical level, where in fall things start to die, crops start to die, plants start to die, it gets colder. A lot of people during that time frame, unless you had secured some way to stay warm during those cold months, if you were living in a part of the world where it got that cold, you may not have made it out of winter alive. I know it's a little bit different over in Africa and in some of the more Middle Eastern countries, but like say if you were in Europe, winter would have been a totally different beast than say over in Africa or the Middle East or the Mediterranean. But nonetheless, food and the growing of crops would have not been as diverse during the winter months. So the big difference between winter and summer, it would have been drastic. So fall would be representative of things dying, and the beginning of the new year, like right now, in the beginning of the new year, we're working our way into spring, and that is the rebirth of the sun. It's when the sun, summer is when the sun is fully at its height, but spring is where the sun actually begins its ascent, right? And right after winter is when you start to prepare for that. So once again, we're kind of go back into the whole solar year aspect of this. So why is the solar year so important? And I know this is probably the second time that I've said this, but I really want to ingrain this into all of us, because I need to remember this also. In fall, it is the end of the solar year. It's the end of the sun's height. It is also the end of the Re, the Rau, or the Kundalini that is within us. It is when that energy is at its lowest, right? And it goes into hibernation. It goes into the Greeks kind of talk about this. They talk about the underworld, right? And then you've got the underworld in ancient Sumer, and you've got you've got the underworld in these various mythologies, right? It's the land of the dead, and that's kind of what happens during fall time. That energy goes into the land of the dead, where it's dormant, right? Kind of like a bear will hibernate during those months, right? So it doesn't use up as much energy. It lives off of its fat. It doesn't need to eat as much, right? It goes into a very slow stasis. And that's kind of what happens with the energy within, and the energy without on the outside, right? And then we as people, our part in it, because we are a bit more conscious, we can prepare for the rebirth of the sun, and we can also prepare for the rebirth of our own Rau or Kundalini, right? We can begin that ascent or that rise again. We prepare for it, right? And that is what the beginning months of spring are, because spring will start in March, right? And that's just like next month, right? And so we've got maybe 30 days or so to prepare for when spring actually starts again, right? And that's when that energy, that Rau, or Kundalini energy will start to sprout forth. And actually, if you look at some of the old ancient Kemetic holidays, we just had one. We had the I believe it was the going forth of singing Wadjet, which is Wadjet is the snake or the serpent goddess, right? It is the beginning stages, which is why most of the posts that you guys will see me put out are about these serpents, right? Or about the snakes, the royal snake, the coiling up of the energy, right? I'm not just putting this out arbitrarily. This information is being put out because this is the time of the year where that information needs to be reawakened within us. We need to remember after winter that we are preparing for that energy to reawaken. And so that's kind of what the solar year is. That's the first topic I wanted to talk about on this list, is the solar year. What does it all mean? I think we kind of encapsulated that by talking about why the sun is so important, what the sun, the physical sun, means, what the metaphorical sun represents, the differences between the sun, S-U-N, and the sun, S-O-N, and how they interrelate, and why some of these cultures, these ancient cultures, would tie the sun into an actual person, or they would deify it into a sun, S-O-N, the descendant of something great, right? We see this in multiple religions, Kemetic spirituality. We see it in ancient Sumerian spirituality, and we also see it in some of the Christian religions, because they derived their spiritual systems directly from these systems that we're discussing, even though they will never let that part from their lips, but they did. So that's kind of what the sun actually represents. It starts in fall. It doesn't really start in fall, but we're going to start in fall with these discussions because it's easier to talk about why something lives or why something is reborn if you discuss why it diminished or died. So the sun falls or dies in fall. It goes into hibernation during those months of October, November, December, January, or December. And then we have the with the winter solstice, we have the longest night and the longest night of the year, meaning with we have the longest night of the year in the winter solstice, and then that marks the end of the longest nights of the year, and then the beginning of the sun returning at the winter solstice. That's where we get the whole ideology behind the sun being reborn in December. If you've heard this before, that's what it means. The sun being reborn. This is a Kemetic representation, along with some other representations in other cultural, spiritual, and religious systems. And so the death of the sun is representative of life going into, like I said, that death, stagnation, stasis, and being prepared to be reborn again. And that's why these sun deities or these sun gods have always been reverenced so much. Heru, Ra, the sun itself, and like we said earlier, why pharaohs and kings tied themselves to these deities and these to the sun itself, because it gave them the right to rule, right? We were just discussing the new solar year. What does it mean? That it starts in fall. We talked about the death of the sun, S-U-N, and the death of the sun, S-O-N, as they correlate and are interrelated. We talked about the sun symbology, also their reference to ancient divine deities, Heru, Ra, or Re, and the physical sun itself. We talked about the beginning of the solar year and what it means, both on a physical level and also on a physical level, also on an interpersonal level, and then also on a spiritual level. We talked a little bit about the rise of Wadjet, and Wadjet is the serpent goddess in ancient Kemet. We talked about how the serpent goddess is the symbol, or the Urius is the symbol for Ra, or Re. It's on his crown, so if you look at his crown, you see the serpent. And that symbol is related to the sun's energy itself. This Wadjet is connected to the Urius. The Urius is more of a symbol, whereas Wadjet was a deified persona. But they're related. They're very much so related. The Urius was very much so an integral part of ancient Kemet. We see the Urius on the crowns of the Egyptian or the Kemetic pharaohs, along with the vulture goddess, Nekbet. That's another archetype that we'll get into, but not necessarily in this particular video or in this live stream. But the Urius, or the serpent, was an integral part of the ancient Kemetic system, simply because it did tie into the solar energy, and it did tie into the rising of that solar energy, or what we earlier discussed was to the Indians, the Indians in India. It's the Kundalini, and in Kemet it is the Ra, or the Ra'u. And that directly ties into the Shin system, which is what is used in the Kemetic system, and the chakra system, which is used in India. And we've got a couple more points on the Shin and chakra system before we move into astrology, and what is astrology, why astrology, and a bit more on that topic. But what does it all mean, right? And that's a big question. It's a simple, easy question, but the explanation can be a little bit difficult to understand or swallow, because you kind of have to understand what these spiritual people what they were really trying to do. They weren't just wanting to leave artifacts around for us to be in awe of. That's not really what it was about. The pyramids were not just built so that we could be in awe of them. They were not built so that conquerors could have a great tourism cash flow. That's not why the pyramids were built or put there. Haramakhet, or the great lion, King Lion. It's not a sphinx. Sphinx is a Greek word. A sphinx is a combination of I believe, a lion, a griffin, and an eagle. It's three different animals put in one. A lot of what we know about these ancient systems in Kemet, or in Egypt, is from the Greeks, and they didn't understand everything. I mean, yeah, Alexander the Great went into Kemet and conquered it and forced them to make him a king, make him a god, but he wasn't inducted into the totality of these great African spiritual systems. He wasn't. They didn't just give their information to him. He may have conquered them, and they gave him what he wanted. They made him a king, but he wasn't a native to that land. He was a conqueror, you guys, and that means something great. When somebody comes into your land and they conquer it, they're not indigenous to that land, and if they are receiving any sort of accolades, it's because they've got an army, they've got a military. And the people are forced to abide by the new conqueror, right? So he was not indigenous to the land. He was not indigenous to these systems. He was not born into the priesthood, nor was he learned of all the sacred and the spiritual learning that would have came along with being a pharaoh or priest king or whatnot. I'm gonna move this up a little bit because I think it's making my face a little bit. Okay. So any questions so far? Just want to kind of put that out there. I know we've gone over a lot of information, and that's why I usually drop tidbits of this information throughout the year online. And I also have our Ancient Tree of Life website up so that it breaks up this huge discussion into consumable, smaller portions, tidbits, if you will, that are easily to consume. I once explained to a young person, and they understood it pretty quickly. I explained how the idea of God, why some cultures believe that the Egyptians, for instance, and even the ancient Sumerians, why they had so many gods. It's not that there were actual physically all these different gods, right? A lot of cultures believe in monotheism, and I understand why. I don't completely agree with their complete reasoning behind it, but I do understand. So let's just say, for instance, you had a circle, or let's just say, for instance, you had a round piece of glass, right? A circle, a round piece of glass, right? And let's just say you call this round piece of glass, let's just say you called it God, right? And this is God, this round piece of glass. Let's just say you got this round piece of glass and you threw it to the ground and it shattered into pieces, right? It's still God, but it's in these many different pieces. These different pieces have different shapes now. They fit differently. You can look at them individually differently. When you go to put them back together, you have to look at them differently and identify them differently in order to put them back together, right? And that is where you get the idea of these individual gods, or the idea behind polytheism. Is because polytheism is simply you individualizing independent parts of God and giving it a label so that you can understand that smaller part better. And as you understand smaller parts better, when you start pairing them with these other pieces, you get a larger piece, so you understand this larger piece more, right? And then eventually, after you put it all back together, you understand the totality of it. It is very difficult to swallow an entire apple, right? You can't swallow an apple. You can bite off a piece of an apple, and you can chew it, and you can consume it, and then bite off another piece of an apple, right? And that is my simplest and easiest way of explaining the difference between polytheism and monotheism. Is polytheism is the many different pieces or aspects of God, and once you're able to learn, because that's what we're doing, we're learning, right? And anybody claims to know is trying to usurp you. Any organization, any religious organization that is claiming to know it all and to have witnessed and to have experienced and know God itself, they're lying to you. They lied to you, and their only reason behind this was to control you, was to control your mind, your heart, your ancestral tether to what your people had gone through and what your people had learned to get to where they are now. And they're usurping you. They're nothing more than an early government system, and that's what a lot of these big religious systems are. They're nothing more than governments, right? They're governing bodies over religion. Before that turns into a rant, we'll kind of leave it there. But the Shin chakra system is, I'm trying to think how we actually got from polytheism, monotheism to the Shin chakra system. I know I was breaking it up, because going into the Shin chakra system is a big piece of apple to sort of bite into. But to make it more easier to understand, within our systems, within our bodies, we have these centers for energy, right? These centers where energy spirals. Probably the best way for me to try to explain it. They circle or they spiral. Remember, energy moves. If energy were stagnant, it would die. It would dissipate. Okay, so energy moves, and the easiest way for something to stay in place and move is a circle, right? So that's why the chakra systems are representative of circles spiraling energy systems within the body, just as the shin is a circle or a spiraling circle of energy within the body. If you want to know what a shin is, just look up shin. You can spell it S-H-E-N. A shin center, a shin circle, or even a shin ring. It looks very much so like a cartouche, and a cartouche is more so, it's oblong. A cartouche is like sort of oblong like that, and then it's got a rope at the end of it. A lot of the hieroglyphs in ancient Kemet are written in a cartouche. And so a cartouche and a shin they look similar, except for a shin is circular. See if I can draw a circle. Circular instead of rectangular or oblong. But the shin chakra system, they're spiraling centers in the body. There's an agreed upon 7 of them within the body. And these particular centers house or control various aspects of our feelings, I guess our state of being would probably be the best way to explain it. And I'm not going to get into where they're at right now. I can kind of point on them, but you've got one at the base of the body where the reproductive organs are. There's one there. So there's one there. There's another where the navel is. The other is in the solar plexus of the body. So here. The 4th one is the heart, which is here. The 5th one is the throat, which is here. The 6th one is the 3rd eye, which is here. And the 7th is the crown, which is right above the head. And if we wanted to sort of visually understand this or confirm this, if you look at any of the ancient Kemetic deities, any of which are also called Netters or Neturu, every one of them has a crown above their head with a symbol, and that is their 7th chakra. As we said earlier, the crown chakra of Ra or Re is a Urius, or the Uchat, surrounded by a sun. A Set, which is Isis to the Greeks, is a throne. A Sar, who is also Osiris, which is the consort of Heru, of Aset, is an eye. So it's the third. It's I'm not going to say it's the 3rd eye, but it's the great eye, right? If our eye is here, then the 3rd eye would be the 3rd eye of our world would be Asar. Heru is a little bit different, because I do not believe his crown is not just one crown. It is a combination of 2 or 3 crowns. He has the lower red crown of Kemet, of I believe it's Upper Kemet. He's got the white crown of Lower Kemet, which is the it almost looks like a bowling pin, like the pin when you go bowling. It looks like one of those. And the upper crown, the lower crown sits in the upper crown. And then he also has this, it almost looks like a long number 9 that comes out of the lower crown, and it goes up, and then it swirls into, which almost looks like a 9. So his crown is a little bit different, because he is said to be the unification of Upper and Lower Kemet. And he also wears the crown of his father, which is that white crown. The red crown is called a deshret, and I can't remember what the upper crown is. I get the two confused, because Lower Kemet is actually Upper Kemet, and Upper Kemet is actually Lower Kemet, because they changed the positioning in most maps as far as in Egypt, where Lower Egypt and Upper Egypt was. They changed it. And when I say they, I mean the invaders. So Upper Kemet is the white crown. Lower Kemet, which is the Deshret, is the lower crown. So each of the Netter or the gods has a crown, and that is their seventh chakra, or I don't want to say metaphysical, but it's their high, one of their highest energy portions of their being. I hope that makes sense. It's a little bit of a difficult discussion or explanation to have, especially like on the spot. But that is their crowns, their crown chakras, or their seventh chakras. And as I said, inside of us, we have our 7 chakras, and those are the agreed upon 7 chakras. From what I've been told, there's more. And what we're trying to do at the beginning of the year, like I said, at the end of the year, the Ra or the Ra'u or the Kundalini dissipates. With the sun, it goes into hibernation or stasis, where it goes to sleep. The beginning of the year, it comes back to life with the sun as we get closer to the sun. So those chakra centers can become reactivated after being asleep, or after being in a state of stasis for so many months. They can become reactivated, and they become reactivated through the Ra, the Ra'u, or the Kundalini, essentially the serpent energy working its way up from the lowest chakra Shin center up to the highest and bursting out of the top. And this is why we have in the ancient Kemetic pharaohs, their crown has a serpent at the very base of the head here. That is where you have the serpent next to Nekhbet, which is the vulture goddess, right? So we know for a fact that they did work with, or at least have an understanding of, the chakra system, the Ra, the Ra'u, and how they interrelated with the Shin and the chakra system in the body. Now, did all pharaohs have this understanding? I'm going to say in the beginning pharaohs most likely did, as I believe they were more priests. They were priest kings. So they were spiritual leaders, but then they were also kings, right? They were rulers, they were leaders. As the dynasties went on, as we move further away from the old kingdom and work our way into the new kingdom, and as invaders came in and the crown was passed from indigenous native rulers and inhabitants to invaders, I'm going to say that was lost. That understanding, that ideology, that reverence, that worship, that work of charging the Shin and the chakras with the Ra and the Ra'u, I'm going to say that information was lost. That is my belief, that those invaders and those later dynasties did not work with these systems that we're discussing here today. I don't think they worked with them. I think they just wanted to own a country. They just wanted to own Kemet. They wanted to own Egypt. They wanted her resources. They wanted the gold. They wanted the milk and the honey, if you will. They wanted all the resources. They wanted the trade. They wanted access to the farming, the agriculture. They wanted access to all these things. They wanted it for their own. And that's all they cared about. They weren't the spiritual leaders. They weren't the They weren't the priest kings. They weren't the priests. They were just rulers. And I'm going to go back to when we started this discussion here tonight about how there's a lot of noise. Actually, I talked about this a few weeks ago, but there's a lot of noise in these groups, especially on Facebook. There's a lot of noise in these groups. And everybody wants, I'm not going to say everybody, but the current regime that occupies Kemet, that occupies Egypt, because it's Egypt now, it's no longer Kemet. They pretty much only care about what those newer kingdom rulers wanted, which were the resources. Which is why you'll see them post about tourism and come to Egypt and take a tour, book with us, or you'll have people who will repost information about a new artifact that may have been discovered or dug up as they're digging up these pharaohs and rulers out of the earth from their resting place, right? It's so wrong that they're doing this. I mean, I understand, but I don't necessarily agree. But they're not focusing on the spiritual aspect that would have been the premise for these rulers and why they were buried the way that they were, the symbology in how they were buried, their ceremonial and traditional artifacts. They don't really care about that. All they care about is the money that comes in from the tourism, that comes in from the attraction, right? And that's not what Kemet was. That's not what Kemet was. At its height, Kemet was a center, kind of like America. It was a center of trade, of information, of learning, of teaching. It was the crooks of the world, right? Crooks, not crook. It was the crooks of the world. And a lot of these people online, they don't care for what the old kingdom, what the original dynasties may have been working at, what they may have been doing. And so we're going to leave it there. I was kind of wanting to go over some other things like astrology and the solar year and all that stuff, but that would make this a very long webinar and a very long event, and we're gonna leave it at that. So once again, I know we went over a lot of information here. These discussions, I love talking about them, but there's a lot of information because we're recreating the past. We're putting it together with as much information as we do have. And that's not necessarily a fast or an easy thing. It's not like putting out a quick post with a picture and a caption and saying, go here to this website and read about it. I understand a lot of the information that we put out there, whether it be on the blog, it's in-depth information. But I love sharing information, and that's why it's there. We'll do part 2 of this. I'm going to say like maybe in a week or two. And then we'll go over astrology again. There is a post on astrology at the Ancient Tree of Life channel on YouTube. There is a video on astrology. There's also a video on numerology. We didn't get into numerology in this video because it doesn't really have anything to do with the solar year and what the solar year is. The things that we'll talk about in depth a little bit later are the tools that go along with this information. So once you get a taste for what you've watched here today, you may have questions. And that's what the other videos are for. That's what the other posts on the blog channel are, or on the blog, which are at ancienttreeoflife.com. So for YouTube videos, you're going to go to ancienttreeoflife.com youtube.com/@ancienttreeoflife. And then the blog is at ancienttreeoflife.com. Eventually, at some time down the road, and this has always been my dream, is to set up an education system or a learning system, or dare I say a school or a schooling system. But that's going to be down the road. We need contributors. So if you would like to contribute, donate, subscribe, monetarily, we love your likes, and we love your following, and we encourage you to share this with others that you feel may be interested or drawn to this type of ancient information. But we also want to do more. We want to share more, but that requires more resources. Like, I'll get into some of the technical stuff, right? Not too technical, but in order to have a learning system up, we have to have a website above and beyond the current website that has courses embedded in it and a whole system. And that requires a website. We already have the domain name. It's going to be ancienttreeoflife.org, most likely .org. We have the .com and we have the .org, but for the learning system, or the school, dare I say, it's going to require another website, and that website is going to have cost, probably about $15 a month just for the hosting of it. And while it's not a lot, and I could do it, I want this to be a community project. I want you to be involved in it. I want you to contribute. That way you're part of the making of it. And I also have other projects that I'm working on as well, so I'm trying not to stretch myself too thin. But that is something that is down the road, something that goes a little bit more into the technical mechanics and the sciences behind how do you tap into these energies. One of the things I remember learning or hearing a few years ago was that once you identify with a particular deity, with a particular neter or neturu, once you work with it for a period of time, you start to embody those qualities, right? This is some powerful stuff, you guys. You begin to imbue those qualities, and you become a living shrine for these archetypes, right? You become, say, a modern day Aset, or a modern day Heru, or a modern day Asar, right? Or a modern day Het Heru, right? Which is Hather to the Greeks. And so you become like the voice or the mouthpiece, but you have to learn certain things. You have to learn to cast aside your ego. You have to learn to meditate. You have to learn to allow these subtle energies that speak subtly throughout the day, throughout the month, throughout the years, to collect within you, right? And that can't be rushed. Once again, it's akin to that boat, that ark or that vessel that the Pharaoh sits upon, that is slowly sailing down the river Nile, right? It's not something that can be rushed. It's something that becomes a part of you, and that has become loved by you, and that becomes you. These deities, these energies, they become a part of you. They become your family. And once you realize that and get to that point, all different types of things start happening in your life, you guys. You start seeing synchronicities, events that correlate, that you wouldn't have seen before. And that's why I mentioned in some earlier videos that I will not be sharing a lot of this information with the public and the masses. These videos are different because this is basically, these are introductions, but we're starting to make a lot of this information only available to members. So if you're a member, you get access to exclusive information. So if you go to ancienttreeoflife.com right now and you scroll down to the bottom and you click on members, there's a member section there. There are pages on that site that you don't have access to if you're not a member. You might be able to read like a snippet of it, but you won't get access to the full the full content. And I had to make this decision simply because I believe that this information was not, even back in ancient days, was not available to the public for a particular reason. Because some people would do very bad things with knowing this information. And they did. If you look back at history, you'll see it. I don't have to pinpoint anything or mention anything to you. You will see that invaders came in, invaders took information, and invaders duplicated this information, and invaders created their own systems, which became world religions, and changed it, and then demonized the very thing that they took, and then slaughtered the people that believed in it. Right? So this information, I had to come to a conclusion that instead of just sharing it freely, because sharing is in my heart, it's what I love doing, but instead of sharing it freely to people who would maybe not do good with it, we now had to make it exclusive instead of inclusive. But by doing that, we become a community, we become stronger. I'm able to work with people one-on-one a bit more, and I'm able to empower people a bit more. And when we get to that point where we can start empowering individuals and creating leaders, when we start creating more shrines, living shrines, things are going to change. They already are. But things are going to change. I've got ideas that I'll share later on. But perks of the membership, we have a Patreon site, which I haven't used in a very long time, but I will be using it more. You'll get access to particular type of videos that are not readily available to the public. You're going to get access to not webinars like this, but certain classes, certain training sessions. You'll get access to. There are certain videos on this YouTube channel right now, which as of February the 2nd, 2025, are available to the public. After this month, maybe even after today, though, some of those videos will not be available. They won't be public anymore on YouTube. They will only be accessible if you're a member. And I'm not going to give any names of any titles of anything that's on that YouTube channel. It's a vault. You just won't have access to it unless you're a member. And if you're a member, that means you support the community, you support yourself, you support the past, and you support the future. So that's not a real big problem. But yeah, we're going to be using the Patreon channel a little bit more, so you get access to exclusive posts. We'll also have a Ancient Tree of Life discussion forum. We have one on Facebook, but we're going to have one on the site. It'll have a chat system as well, so you'll be able to chat with other people. I know we do enjoy using Facebook. I know some of us don't like using Facebook. And to be honest, you guys, Facebook has done some things that I don't necessarily approve of over the past 4 years. And so I would really like to put our support into our own community on the Ancient Tree of Life site. That has two effects. One, it strengthens our community by putting it back on the Ancient Tree of Life site. And two, from an SEO perspective, which is search engine optimization, the more traffic we have on our website, the more lift our website has and the more people we can reach. So the more the Ancient Tree of Life website is used, the more Google gives favor to it. And so that's the reason why we want to have a chat system and a forum system on Ancient Tree of Life. If you have any questions about this, feel free to reach out with questions. You can reach me on Instagram, Twitter. Instagram, Ancient Tree of Life is the channel. On X or Twitter, it's Ancient Tree Life. On Facebook, it's Ancient Tree of Life, or ancienttreeoflife.com. So I'm going to wrap it up. I think we've been together for a few moments tonight. I appreciate it. I do enjoy sharing. And once again, feel free to like, and follow us on YouTube. If you have any friends or followers or anyone that you'd like to build a community with, share this information with them. Share information with them that your intuition may be saying, hey, they might like this. Let me send this off to my friend. Let me send this off to my spouse. Let me send this off to yada, 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 right? So, once again, thank you for coming out. Thank you for liking. I see that we've got some likes on the videos, so thank you, Imhotep. And I will talk to you guys later. This is Ray Ia with the Ancient Tree of Life channel, talking about ancient Egyptian gods and the ancient Meso-Sumerians. And in our next webinar, we will be discussing astrology and why astrology is so important. What is astrology? We'll be talking about the sun's solar year, the 365 days, the 12 astrological signs, which happen every 30 days inside of that solar year. There's a reason, you guys. Just as we have one body with 7 chakras, remember this: the solar year is one solar year with 12 solar signs within it. So could those 12 solar signs be like 12 chakras for the solar year? It's possible. And then we've also got every 3 days the moon changes signs, right? The moon goes from we were in Pisces, the moon was in Pisces a few nights ago, and then it went into Aries, and it's in a particular sign for about 2 to 3 days. And every 2 to 3 days the moon will go from a piece of it being revealed to a piece of the full moon being revealed, right? Or vice versa. We'll have more of the moon and then less of the moon as we go from the waning to the waxing crescent and the waxing to the waning, right? We'll talk about the lunar cycles that happen every 2 to 3 days. We'll talk about tuning your intuition and your psyche. We'll talk about how this is an actual learning system and how this information actually enhances learning and intuition, right? We live in a time right now where we are being manipulated left and right, politically, via the news. We're being lied to left and right. It used to be back in the day that information, whoever had information, was in the know. And now that information is so readily available, they don't know what the hell to do. And so they're lying when they put news out. They're lying when they put information out. They're masking the truth and trying to create confusion. They're trying to keep us distracted. This learning system will actually help you break through. Now, some people are not going to like that, and those people will not be interested in this information. Some people get something out of the lie. You have to remember this. Right? Some people get something out of the lie. Some people are tired of the lie and they want the truth. And that is the division between those that know and those that don't. We're going to talk about how the ancient Sumerian pantheon of gods and goddesses ties into this, how it ties into the chakra system directly but indirectly. We'll talk about the ladder of lights, which is the ancient Meso-Sumerian system of understanding and learning. And we'll talk about how the ladder of lights ties into the chakra and the Shin system. So thanks for coming out. Thanks for watching. Remember to click like, remember to follow, remember to share. And are you ready to learn more? Talk to you guys soon. Have a good one. This is Ray Ia, Imhotep.